"Who do you think you are, walking into my courtroom this late?" That was the first thing Maya Johnson heard as she stepped through the courtroom door. The words rang out cold and sharp in the quiet room, causing everyone to turn and look. She froze in place. No one knew that the woman being scolded was, actually, a senior legal advisor at the United States Department of Justice. 6:30 a.m. The first rays of sunlight were just peeking through the glass towers of downtown Charlotte, North Carolina. On the 20th floor of a high-rise apartment, Maya Johnson, 38 years old, woke up right on time, as usual. A former military lawyer, now serving as a legal advisor for the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ, Maya always started her day with discipline and precision. Today, she wasn't headed to a federal building, nor was she litigating a major case. Just a small matter, contesting a parking ticket at city court, a personal issue that seemed simple enough. Maya quickly ate a banana, poured coffee into her thermal mug, and threw on her dark navy blazer. White shirt, black slacks, neat but not flashy. She didn't bring her DOJ badge. "This should only take 15 minutes, she muttered. Her Cadillac Escalade pulled out of the parking lot. She turned on NPR, relaxing to the morning news. At 8:15, the Bluetooth system chimed an urgent call from Washington, from her direct superior. "Maya, sorry to call so early. The police brutality complaint in Louisville just had a new development. The defendant filed an emergency motion. We need a rapid analysis. I have 45 minutes before a minor hearing at city court. I'll look into it right now." Maya quickly pulled into a small cafe, opened her laptop, and used her phone as a Wi-Fi hotspot. She dove into the documents, taking notes, formulating counter-arguments. With a sharp mind, she handled it like a military operation. By the time she looked up, it was 8:50. Maya felt a slight panic. She called her boss back, summarized her findings, and promised to send a full report after court. She got in the car and sped off. While driving, an anonymous message popped up on her phone screen. "If you're black and heading to Judge Hale's courtroom, you better have your recorder on." Maya paused for a second. She had heard some rumors about Judge Gregory Hale, known for being tough, but she had never dealt with any cases under him. Probably just one of those activist warnings, she thought. But the moment she stepped into the courthouse at 9:10, things escalated beyond anything Maya had imagined. She was asked for additional documents, while the white person ahead of her passed through without question. The guard eyed her up and down, his gaze full of suspicion and prejudice. "Are you a lawyer?" the guard asked. "Number I just carry a briefcase because it matches my blazer," Maya replied coldly, walking past him. She had just stepped into the courtroom when Judge Hale's voice thundered, "Who do you think you are, walking into my courtroom this late?" The room went silent. Every eye turned toward Maya. A white woman who had arrived just minutes earlier was still sitting quietly on the right side bench. No one had said a word to her. Maya had no idea that those few minutes of being late would trigger a chain of events that would force Charlotte's entire judicial system to take a hard look at itself. And the opponent she was about to face wouldn't be the defendant. It would be the very bias wearing a judge's robe. Maya walked into the courtroom as she had many times before in her career, but this time not as a legal representative of the Department of Justice, but as an ordinary citizen. And because of that, she immediately felt the difference in the stares, in the way people treated her. That morning, the Charlotte City courtroom wasn't too crowded. About 20 people scattered across old wooden benches, waiting to be called for minor violations like illegal parking, speeding, or late fine payments. No one paid attention to anyone else until Maya walked in. 9:10 a.m. As she opened the door, she locked eyes with Judge Gregory Hale, who paused his writing and looked up at her with a cold stare. He interrupted the ongoing hearing, causing the man at the witness stand to freeze mid-sentence. "Who do you think you are, walking into my courtroom this late?" His voice rang out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Maya hesitated mid-step. She took a deep breath, stayed calm, and walked straight to the designated spot. "I apologize for being late, Your Honor. I don't need to hear your excuses. Everyone has a special case." He cut her off, waving his hand with an irritation that seemed preloaded just for her. She glanced around. On the right side bench, a white woman in business attire who had entered just moments before her was looking at her phone, unbothered, not called out, not questioned. Maya turned back to face the judge. The clerk, Julia Tran, sitting beside him, momentarily paused her typing. "What's your name?" he asked, even though he could have easily read it from the list in front of him. "Maya Johnson." "Maya Johnson, your hearing was scheduled for exactly 9 o'clock. You're 10 minutes late. We take punctuality seriously here." In her mind, she wanted to explain that she had been handling an urgent federal case, that she had used every minute to make it on time. But she knew in this situation, no matter how valid the reason, it would be dismissed as an excuse. Judge Hale leaned forward. His voice was steady but commanding. "I'll deal with your case later. Sit down and wait your turn. And remember, everyone is equal in this courtroom." A statement that sounded fair, but Maya knew very well not everyone was treated equally here. She silently walked to a seat, the eyes of those around her still lingering on every step she took. In that air, no one said a word. But sometimes, silence is the clearest proof of bias. Toward the back row, an older black man in a worn-out suit gently shook his head. He didn't say anything, but his eyes met Maya's. Maya realized he had been through this. Maybe once. Maybe all his life. She took out her phone and quickly jotted down a few notes. Entered at 9:10. First question was confrontational. White woman entered earlier, not questioned. Begin observation log urgent. This was no longer about a parking ticket, and Maya knew though she had come to court today as an ordinary citizen, she would not leave this place without making a mark on a system slowly decaying beneath the facade of justice. The courtroom remained quiet like any normal morning until Judge Gregory Hale read aloud. "Maya Johnson, step forward." Maya took a deep breath. She stepped up to the witness stand, head held high, calm in her posture. But she knew full well. His gaze wasn't assessing the facts of the case, it was sizing her up. A black woman, arriving late, dressed neatly but not luxuriously in Judge Hale's eyes, that equated to not serious enough. He didn't ask for a reason. He didn't begin with a proper greeting. He got straight to the point, as if he had been waiting to hand down punishment. "Ms. Johnson, do you think being 10 minutes late can just be overlooked?" "Your Honor, I sincerely apologize. I had an urgent government matter beforehand and tried my best to arrive on time," Maya replied gently but clearly. He folded his arms, leaned back in his chair, his eyes filled with both disapproval and contempt. "I've heard every excuse, from traffic to accidents, from sick kids to rainstorms. Do you think you're the first one to try and explain?" Maya remained calm. She had encountered people like Hale, before people who didn't care what you said, because, in their minds, you were already wrong. A few murmurs rose from the back. Julia Tran, the court clerk, looked up briefly, her fingers pausing over the keyboard. It seemed she, too, sensed something wasn't right. "As the one responsible for maintaining order in this court, I hereby fine you $500 for failing to comply with the court's time regulations," Judge Hale declared loudly, then slammed his gavel down hard. A few people in the room flinched, Maya stood still, showing no reaction. But inside, she was observing more closely than ever. The security officer, Mr. Malik Rhodes, squinted slightly. He had seen many incidents like this in his 15 years working at the courthouse, but this time, and began to record the fine. But before she entered the amount, she hesitated for a few seconds, her expression briefly confused. Just 30 minutes earlier, a white man had arrived 7 minutes late, but he only received a light verbal reminder. No fine, no gavel, and certainly no one looked at him like he was irresponsible. Maya slowly took out her phone, not to argue, but to take notes. Time, 9:21, $500 fine, no reason asked, no context compared. Earlier, one white male late, no penalty. She wasn't documenting out of bitterness, but out of professional instinct. Every irregularity must be recorded. Judge Hale looked at her with satisfaction, as if he had just taught her a well-deserved lesson. And I want that fine paid before you leave the courthouse. We don't let anyone go without fulfilling their obligations. Maya gave a slight nod, her eyes steady and unshaken. No one in that room knew they had just witnessed an act that would become critical evidence in a chain of events that would shake the entire system. And no one knew the woman who had just been unfairly fined was not just another ordinary citizen. She was Maya Johnson, the one who had once forced an entire police precinct chief to resign over bias. And this time, she would not stay silent. As the ruling concluded, Judge Gregory Hale looked down and turned to the next case file, as if everything had ended. But he had no idea that what he had just done wasn't simply an administrative decision. It was a blow to the very credibility of this courtroom. Maya stood still at the witness stand. She took a deep breath. Every instinct inside her warned. The time for silence had passed. She spoke, her voice low and firm, yet calm. Your Honor, before I leave this courtroom, I would like to clearly state my identity, to avoid any misunderstanding about my attitude or circumstances this morning. The entire room froze for a few seconds. Julia Tran, the court clerk, looked up slightly, her hands pausing on the keyboard. The elderly guard, Malik Rhodes, standing in the back, unconsciously took a step forward. Maya opened her briefcase. From a small compartment, she pulled out a leather wallet and slowly removed an official government ID card with a golden U.S. seal set against a deep blue background. She held the card high for all to see. I am Maya Johnson, Senior Legal Advisor with the U.S. Department of Justice, specializing in investigations of civil rights violations. I'm currently working directly with the Office of Internal Oversight in Washington, D.C. The room felt like it exploded in silence. Almost everyone turned to look at Maya, then turned to Judge Hale. His face went pale in an instant. The hand that had been flipping pages froze in midair. Maya continued, her eyes steady and composed. I was late this morning because I was urgently handling a federal case involving police brutality. I can provide electronic proof of the call and the documents I worked on earlier today. No one spoke. Only the sound of Julia's slowed keystrokes and the faint breeze outside the window remained. The elderly black man in the back row, the one who had witnessed many unjust rulings here, sat upright. He tried to speak, but could only manage a broken sentence. If I had known your position. Maya cut him off, her tone firmer. Your Honor, my position should not determine how I am treated. What concerns me is, how will justice protect those who don't carry a badge like mine? She turned to face the courtroom. I've documented at least 3 late arrivals this morning. 2 white individuals who received no warnings, 1 Asian student who got a light reprimand, and I was the only one fined, with the highest penalty recorded in the past 6 months, for an administrative violation. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. A few people lowered their heads, as if something had just clicked. Others exchanged glances, nodding quietly. Maya took out her phone, opened her email app, and hit send. Within seconds, a detailed incident report, along with a recommendation for internal investigation, had been sent to the Department of Justice. She closed her briefcase and stepped down from the witness stand, walking with calm and confidence. The courtroom door closed gently behind her, leaving Judge Hale sitting in stunned silence, and a room heavy with the unspoken realization: this is the moment everything must change. Less than 2 hours after Maya left the courtroom, an anonymous email appeared in the internal inbox of the Charlotte City Court. The subject line was simple: she dared to speak. The anonymous sender included only a brief summary of that morning's events and a single sentence: maybe it's time we take a hard look at what we've been ignoring. In the staff break room of the courthouse, the normally quiet atmosphere had turned strangely tense. Julia Tran, the court clerk, sat in front of her computer screen, eyes fixed on the email she had just received. She had worked alongside Judge Hale for nearly 8 years, and though she had always suspected certain rulings were unfair, she never imagined she'd live to see a day when everything was laid bare like this. Across the hall, Malik Rhodes, the security officer, stood in front of the coffee machine, holding a paper cup, but not drinking. In his mind played the image of Maya, holding up her DOJ badge that morning. He had witnessed many silently oppressed people, but this was the first time he saw someone not only stand up, but make the entire system pause. That afternoon, a law student who attended the hearing posted on social media an article titled, "Do you believe in justice? I just saw someone make a court rethink itself." The post quickly went viral. Hundreds of shares, thousands of comments, many recounting similar experiences in Charlotte, where people of color were consistently treated more harshly than white individuals. Meanwhile, at the Department of Justice office in Washington, D.C., Maya Johnson's urgent report had been delivered to the Office of Internal Affairs. Investigators didn't take long to zero in on the key figure: Judge Gregory Hale, 22 years on the bench, with numerous informal complaints of biased rulings, but never subjected to a formal investigation. An internal review was launched the very next day. More than 300 minor case rulings, from parking violations to disorderly conduct, were pulled for comparison. And a stark truth began to surface. The average fine for black defendants was 2.4 times higher than that for white defendants in identical situations. Case durations for people of color were significantly shorter, often denying them any real chance to explain their circumstances. Back at her office, Maya returned to a phone filled with messages. Colleagues, old friends, even strangers, young black attorneys, law students, and everyday citizens sent words of thanks. One message made her pause for several seconds. "I'm a single mom. Judge Hale once fined me $300 for bringing my child into the courtroom. Today I read your story, and I cried. Finally, someone dared to speak up." Maya looked out the window of her office. Through the room. A few people lowered their heads, as if something had just clicked. Others exchanged glances, nodding quietly. Maya took out her phone, opened her email app, and hit send. Within seconds, a detailed incident report, along with a recommendation for internal investigation, had been sent to the Department of Justice. She closed her briefcase and stepped down from the witness stand, walking with calm and confidence. The courtroom door closed gently behind her, leaving Judge Hale sitting in stunned silence, and a room heavy with the unspoken realization. This is the moment everything must change. Less than 2 hours after Maya left the courtroom, an anonymous email appeared in the internal inbox of the Charlotte City Court. The subject line was simple: "She dared to speak." The anonymous sender included only a brief summary of that morning's events and a single sentence: "Maybe it's time we take a hard look at what we've been ignoring." In the staff break room of the courthouse, the normally quiet atmosphere had turned strangely tense. Julia Tran, the court clerk, sat in front of her computer screen, eyes fixed on the email she had just received. She had worked alongside Judge Hale for nearly 8 years, and though she had always suspected certain rulings were unfair, she never imagined she'd live to see a day when everything was laid bare like this. Across the hall, Malik Rhodes, the security officer, stood in front of the coffee machine, holding a paper cup, but not drinking. In his mind played the image of Maya holding up her DOJ badge that morning. He had witnessed many silently oppressed people, but this was the first time he saw someone not only stand up, but make the entire system pause. That afternoon, a law student who attended the hearing posted on social media an article titled, "Do You Believe in Justice?" "I just saw someone make a court rethink itself." The post quickly went viral. Hundreds of shares, thousands of comments, many recounting similar experiences in Charlotte, where people of color were consistently treated more harshly than white individuals. Meanwhile, at the Department of Justice office in Washington, D.C., Maya Johnson's urgent report had been delivered to the Office of Internal Affairs. Investigators didn't take long to zero in on the key figure: Judge Gregory Hale, 22 years on the bench, with numerous informal complaints of biased rulings, but never subjected to a formal investigation. An internal review was launched the very next day. More than 300 minor case rulings, from parking violations to disorderly conduct, were pulled for comparison. And a stark truth began to surface. The average fine for black defendants was 2.4 times higher than that for white defendants in identical situations. Case durations for people of color were significantly shorter, often denying them any real chance to explain their circumstances. Back at her office, Maya returned to a phone filled with messages. Colleagues, old friends, even strangers, young black attorneys, law students, and everyday citizens sent words of thanks. One message made her pause for several seconds. "I'm a single mom. Judge Hale once fined me $300 for bringing my child into the courtroom. Today I read your story and I cried. Finally, someone dared to speak up." Maya looked out the window of her office. The Charlotte sky wasn't harshly sunny or gloomy. It carried a different kind of weight. A shift was taking place, from sighs that once felt meaningless to alarm bells now ringing throughout the system. She opened her laptop and began typing the first lines of a formal petition for investigation. She knew this was only the beginning. 3 days after Maya Johnson submitted her petition for investigation, the Office of Internal Affairs under the U.S. Department of Justice officially announced the launch of a special inquiry into Judge Gregory Hale and the rulings at Charlotte City Court over the past 5 years. The investigation didn't stop at a single individual. Hale's name was just the starting point, but behind it lay an entire network of opaque rulings where power was disguised beneath red stamps. A senior investigator with over 20 years of experience was appointed to lead the investigation team. On her very first morning in Charlotte, she requested access to all administrative violation records from 2018 to the present over 12,000 cases. The analysis criteria were laid out: defendant's name, race, age, reason for penalty, processing time, fine amount, and notes on the judge's behavior. After just 48 hours of initial review, an unusual pattern clearly emerged. Black individuals accounted for less than 35% of total violations, but over 67% of those who received the highest fines. Among those who were ordered to pay fines on the spot or denied the right to appeal, nearly 80% were minorities. Linda wasn't surprised, but she remained silent for a few minutes, staring at the numbers. "This isn't unconscious bias," she told her team. "This is a systematically maintained habit." Outside the hallway, Julia Tran, the court clerk, decided to do something she hadn't dared in 8 years: submit her personal notes. In her old notebook, she had quietly documented problematic hearings, differences in how the judge asked questions, time allowed for defendants to speak, even unfair wording. Julia met privately with Linda, placed the notebook on the table, her hands still trembling. "I know if I keep this to myself, I'm part of the problem. But now, I can't stay silent." Linda took the notebook, flipped through a few pages, and silently nodded. "This is living evidence," she said. At the same time, Maya Johnson continued receiving dozens of collaborations offers from legal organizations, law schools, and even major media outlets. But she declined TV appearances. She didn't want to become a symbol. She wanted to be a force for action. In a closed-door meeting with federal specialists, Maya proposed 3 initiatives. 1. Establish a review committee for district-level judges in North Carolina. 2. Implement a system for flagging abnormal rulings through regular data tracking. 3. Mandate unconscious bias training for all entry-level judicial personnel. When the meeting ended, a young investigator approached Maya. "Do you know what's happening right now?" "What?" "A lot of judges across the state are deleting posts, deactivating accounts, changing how they handle case files. Some are even taking sudden leave." Maya simply smiled. She didn't need to see them afraid. She only needed to see them change. 2 weeks after the investigation was announced, major newspapers like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution simultaneously published headlines reading, "Charlotte Court under the blade of investigation. Evidence of racial bias in administrative rulings." A partially released 35-page preliminary report from the Office of Internal Affairs was enough to shake the legal system in North Carolina. Among the more than 12,000 reviewed case files, 71% of Black individuals received penalties 1.5 times harsher than white individuals for the same violations. 83% of cases denied the opportunity to explain tardiness involved people of color. Judge Gregory Hale issued fines at 3 times the state average, particularly severe toward Black women. Public reaction erupted immediately. Those who had once remained silent now began to speak out. Hundreds of people sent emails, videos, even handwritten letters to the Office of Investigation. Some came directly to the office, simply hoping to share. That day, I wasn't allowed to speak. I was called irresponsible for being 6 minutes late. I paid the fine, was an elderly man named Samuel Bennett. He had once been fined $400 by Judge Hale for showing an uncooperative attitude after requesting clarification about the fee. He attended the investigation committee's hearing, stood at the microphone, and said just one sentence: "I don't need my money back. I just want someone to admit they were wrong." Inside the hearing room, Maya Johnson sat in the front row. Her face was quiet, but her hands never stopped writing. Next to her was Linda Martinez, the lead investigator, adjusting the final slides for the press conference scheduled for the following morning. Out in the hallway, reporters were already waiting. One whispered to a colleague, "From a parking ticket now, the whole system's been turned upside down." she's not just an ordinary citizen. The next morning, the official press conference was held at Charlotte City Hall. TV crews, online outlets, radio stations all were present. Maya stepped up to the podium alongside Linda and a representative from the Department of Justice. Maya's voice was steady. What shocks us isn't the findings of this investigation. What shocks us is that we allowed this to go on for so long. The justice system was created to protect fairness, not to preserve power for those who abuse it. She paused for a few seconds, her eyes scanning the reporters and attendees. I didn't come here to take down a judge. I came here to restore the trust that the people have lost. Applause erupted throughout the hall. But Maya knew. This was only the beginning phase. Linda continued, presenting 3 key recommendations. 1. Temporarily suspend Judge Gregory Hale and launch a comprehensive review of all rulings issued during his tenure. 2. Establish independent oversight teams in each district to monitor trends in penalties based on race, gender, and socioeconomic status. 3. Implement mandatory training on unconscious bias and systemic fairness for all entry and mid-level judicial personnel. As for Judge Hale, when approached by the press, he declined to comment. He sat alone on a photo outside the courthouse, holding a copy of the investigation report. His head bowed. In the eyes of the public, he was no longer a symbol of discipline, but a relic of a system too outdated and blind to justice. On June 14th, the first public hearing was held at the North Carolina State Court headquarters. On the witness bench, Maya Johnson sat upright, holding a thick file folder. To her left was Mr. Samuel Bennett, the elderly man once unfairly fined. To her right was Julia Tran, the longtime court clerk, carrying the old notebook in which she had recorded unusual behavior over 8 years. Across the room, on one side, Judge Gregory Hale sat apart with his legal representative. His face was contemplative, no longer bearing the authority or coldness it once did. Today, he was no longer the one running the courtroom. He was the one who had to answer. The chair of the investigative committee began with a firm statement. We are not here to prosecute an individual, but to shed light on a system. But when a person representing that system abuses their power, they must be held accountable. Maya was the first invited to stand and testify. She walked to the microphone, opened her folder, and read each detail clearly. I was fined $500 for being 10 minutes late to an administrative hearing. I wasn't allowed to explain. I was scolded by the judge in front of the entire courtroom. But that same morning, 3 others were also late, 2 white individuals, and 1 Asian. They were not fined. One was even gently asked how they were doing. She held up a data chart, extracted from the court's own system. In the past 6 months, there were 84 late arrivals in Judge Gregory Hale's courtroom. Of those, 73% of black individuals were fined administratively. White individuals, only 9%. No one in the room spoke. Even Judge Hale's lawyer simply lowered his head, taking notes without interruption. Next came Julia's testimony. She presented her notebook and read her notes with a choked voice. I don't know when I started writing everything down, but I knew, if I didn't, I would forget. And I didn't want to forget. In it was a section listing dates and times, the names of those judged, their skin color, and the judge's attitude, along with a final note. If this person weren't black, they definitely wouldn't have been scolded. Mr. Samuel Bennett, the silver-haired man, was the final witness. He brought no documents. He only brought memories and quiet resolve. I stood at that stand and was scolded for asking why I was fined. I didn't yell. I didn't insult. I just asked. But I was told I was disrespectful. The next day, my friend, a white man, asked the exact same question. and he got a respectful explanation. "I don't want an apology. I want the truth to be acknowledged." Judge Hale was invited to speak last. He stood up, his hands slightly trembling. After a moment of silence, he said, "I used to think I was fair, that I was just applying the law. But today, I have to look back. I now see things I never admitted before, and that is the greatest mistake of my career." He paused, looking directly at Maya. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, but I thank you for not staying silent like so many others." The air in the hearing room was thick with emotion. The chair of the committee gave the final ruling. The committee will temporarily suspend Judge Gregory Hale. A deeper investigation will be launched, and more importantly, we are initiating a statewide judicial reform plan titled Justice Without Color. Outside the courtroom, a crowd of reporters waited. As Maya stepped out, a young law student approached, holding a notebook. "You didn't just speak the truth, you made justice listen." Maya simply smiled, walking slowly down the courthouse steps. Above her, the sky was still blue, but today, the light seemed clearer than any other day. 2 months after the historic public hearing, the state of North Carolina issued a judicial order titled the Colorless Justice Act, one of the most sweeping district court reform plans in decades. All judges in the state, from trial level to mid-level courts, were required to undergo a mandatory 40-hour unconscious bias training program. The ruling data system was updated, integrated with AI tools to analyze sentencing patterns by demographics, aiming to detect and prevent signs of bias early. A new oversight committee was established, including legal experts, representatives from minority communities, and individuals who had been victims of unjust rulings. Notably, all district-level administrative hearings would now be audio recorded, archived, and randomly audited by an independent monitoring agency. Maya Johnson held no official role in the new system, but her name appeared everywhere, from law school lectures, judicial reform conferences, to training courses for young of the University of North Carolina School of Law. Maya, in a dark navy suit, standing in front of the Charlotte courthouse, with the caption below, "Justice has no shape, but voices will define it." Yet Maya continued her work at the Federal Department of Justice, avoiding all media invitations. She declined every offer to write a book, appear on talk shows, or be featured in documentaries. She always said one thing: "I don't need to be famous. I need change to happen." One Tuesday afternoon, Maya visited a class at Howard Law School, where she had once graduated valedictorian. She didn't announce her visit. As she stepped into the room, the class was discussing the Gregory Hale hearing as part of the Law and Civil Rights course. The professor noticed her first. He said nothing, just nodded. A young student stood up, hesitantly asked, "Are you Maya Johnson?" She smiled softly. "I used to be a student here, and I came to say thank you." The entire class was stunned. "Thank you for what, ma'am?" Another student asked. "For asking questions. I grew up in a generation where silence was considered wisdom. But you're breaking that. And that's the first step toward justice." A female student, on the verge of tears, said, "You changed the way I see this system. I used to want to quit law school, but now I want to do what you do." Maya didn't respond. She simply pulled a small piece of paper from her pocket. It was the $500 fine receipt from that day, now laminated and kept as a keepsake. Justice sometimes begins with something absurd. The whole class stood up, not to applaud, but as a silent vow. Meanwhile, at the state's judicial headquarters, reform meetings continued. A system once thought immovable was now transforming layer by layer, process by process. And at the heart of that seismic shift was not a grand revolution drawn in theory, but a woman who walked into a courtroom, got fined for being late, and refused to stay silent. The day Maya Johnson walked into the courtroom with her government ID in hand, she had no idea she was opening a door. Not a door to glory, but a very old door, long sealed shut by silence, fear, and acceptance. She opened that door with calm. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't resist. She simply stood tall, looked directly at the one in power, and asked for something that seemed simple: justice. But it was her silence, her composure, that the system could not escape. She didn't shout at injustice. She let it collapse under its own weight. And then, other voices began to rise. Clerks who had stayed silent for years. Defendants who had suffered in silence. Law students who once considered quitting because they didn't believe in the system. They all looked at Maya not as a hero, but as a mirror that reflected a truth everyone felt, but no one had dared to name. At a judicial reform conference, renowned Professor Elliot Marshall, former legal advisor to 3 U.S. presidents, was asked, "What makes you believe the system can change?" He didn't quote the law. He didn't cite the Constitution. He simply said, "I believe because a woman was fined $500. And she used that very receipt to make justice look at itself." Today, in more than 20 states, systemic bias evaluation programs are being implemented. Maya Johnson's name doesn't appear on any banners, nor is there a statue of her. But in every training course for new judges, the Charlotte case is mentioned as a reminder. Power doesn't lie in the high bench or the striking of a gavel, but in the eyes that dare to witness the truth. And Maya, in her small office at the Department of Justice, still keeps one single photo frame on her desk. Not a diploma, not an award, just an old laminated slip of paper. The $500 fine receipt. In the bottom right corner, a handwritten note by Maya. "The day I was fined. The day I stood up.